The Medal of Honor series, Lessons of Core Values, is a production of the Army Heritage Center Foundation. The series sponsors include the Qualix team, Qualix and Iron Mountain. Qualix Corporation provides support services for the federal markets in the areas of information management and mission-oriented programs. For over 60 years, Iron Mountain has provided full lifecycle information management solutions that accelerate digital transformation for Fortune 100 companies, governments, and educational institutions all over the globe. And the Pritzker Military Museum and Library of Chicago, established by Colonel Retired Jennifer Pritzker, a nonpartisan institution dedicated to the study of the citizen soldier as an essential element for the preservation of democracy. This program is supported through the generous donation of the Howard and Susan Kramer Family Foundation. Howard Kramer, a Vietnam veteran, served in the 9th Infantry Division at the same time as today's guest. Our guest is Sergeant First Class Retired Sammy Davis. In March 1967, Private First Class Davis was assigned to Battery C, 2nd Battalion, 4th Artillery Regiment, 9th Infantry Division. On November 18th, 1967, his artillery battery fell under machine gun and mortar fires by an estimated 3 companies of Viet Cong. As the VC attack continued, Davis repeatedly exposed himself to enemy fire. Though wounded, he risked himself to save others and continued to fight until the VC unit withdrew. Sergeant Sammy Davis will discuss the value of patriotism. Our host is Colonel Retired Tom Bossler. Tom is a combat veteran of the Vietnam War, a past director of the U.S. Army Military History Institute, a licensed battlefield guide at Gettysburg National Military Park, and an author of 4 books on the Civil War.
Good evening to all our friends out there, this being the 4th of 7 sessions on the core values of the Medal of Honor Society. And a warm welcome to all of you. A couple special thanks to Mr. Kramer, another old reliable. Welcome to the club. I was also down there, as you'll soon find out, down in the 9th Division area of operations. Gary Bykirk, our first Medal of Honor recipient we interviewed, got a note from him. He listens in, so hello to you, Gary, up there in Rochester, New York area. So we are pleased tonight to have an artilleryman here in our presence, a cannoneer, Sammy Davis. And Sammy's going to talk about patriotism. He's going to talk about the actions which he underwent to receive the Medal of Honor. We're a little bit different format tonight because Sammy out there in rural Indiana.
Extreme rural.
Extreme rural Indiana. The internet is not quite fully up to capability, but we do have Sammy on the telephone because Mr. Bell got the telephone line laid out there. So Sammy, good evening to you. How you doing?
I'm doing great, brother. Good to talk with everyone.
Well, we're very pleased that you could join us tonight and that you're going to share some stories with us. And what I'd like to do, and everyone we've talked to now, as I say, this being the 4th one of these that we've done, is start out with, kind of the common man theme, as I found is in working with you fellows, and you're all just common men, that something extraordinary happened to you at a certain period in your life. Tell us about growing up. What was your childhood like as a common man?
Well, my dad worked in the oil field, and we lived in Illinois at that time up until I was about 10, 11 years old, and that's when the oil field crashed in 1956. And so Dad got a job offer from Brown and Root out of Houston, Texas, and we moved to Texas, and he worked down there for a couple of years, and then my mom said, well, I want to move to California and be with my mom. So Dad said, well, if I can find a job. So they found a job at Diamond Walnut, and Diamond Walnut hired Dad, and we moved out there and lived out in California, 5 years. And basically that's where I grew up, my teen years. And then moved back to Indiana and graduated from Mooresville High School in Mooresville, Indiana, and joined the Army and went into the Army immediately out of high school.
So when you say you joined the Army,
Yes, sir.
Did you join the Army or did the Army join you?
No, sir. I joined the Army.
You enlisted. You volunteered, right?
Most certainly.
All right. And so what motivated you? I mean, good Lord, 1960, late 1960s, this is a good time, middle of 1960s, it's a good time.
66 is when I joined, yes.
Good time to join the Army. So what motivated you to do that?
Well, everybody in my family had always been in the military, and that's all I'd heard all my life. You know, it's go do your job, go do your job. So when it came, I graduated from high school and there was a job to be done in Vietnam, I went and did my job.
So that, in terms of a family experience that's been passed down generation to generation, then we're talking something here about patriotism, are we not?
Well, most certainly.
What does that word patriotism, what does that mean to you?
Well, patriotism is a depth of meaning. Patriotism is love. Patriotism is respect. Patriotism is what you feel towards your country and your fellow man. So patriotism is extremely important to help us all carry on and take care of each other.
So you're not the first Medal of Honor recipient on this program to use the word love. A love for your country, love for another human being, a love to your brothers. That you
yes, sir. That's the only thing that can make you go across that river is the love in your heart for your fellow man.
Well, we're gonna have you take us across that river with you one more time, and in just a few minutes. So you enlisted in the Army, and you went to, as I remember from your book, you went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
Well, I went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for basic training, and then Fort Sill, Oklahoma for artillery school.
For advanced individual training as a cannoneer.
Yes,
so
sir.
How did that go?
It went very well. That's what my dad was in the Army. He was artillery, and he basically told me what to expect. Of course, when I got there, it wasn't anything like what he said, but I learned even more.
Well, it won't be too long after your training at Sill that trained you to be a cannoneer or an artilleryman. You're going to ship out to Vietnam, is that right?
Immediately. Well, I got a 30 days leave, and then I went to Vietnam.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, Mike, let's put up that first slide. What I like to do with our audience is to acquaint you. I mean, Vietnam is a big place. It's a long time ago, but just kind of going back, it's just by coincidence that last week's Medal of Honor recipient that we had on the program, Jack Jacobs, served in the Mekong Delta area. I served also in the Mekong Delta area, and Sammy's going to end up. And so we're going to serve not at the same time at different times in about the same 50-kilometer, 60-kilometer box below Saigon, down in the Mekong River Delta, where the Mekong River
yes, sir.
Moves into the South China Sea, and so that will be our area of operation. Mike, let's go to the. Wait a minute, don't go yet. I'll show you on the left, folks. There's the Vietnam map. Rectangle identifies the Mekong Delta area. Then in the center map, there's a little closer blow up of the area that we're talking about. And of course, the pictures, as I already mentioned. Go ahead to the next slide there, Mike. Here is the 9th Division, 9th Infantry Division, the old Reliables. Mr. Kramer, if you remember that. That's our area of operations. I circled on the map in red the area in which the action that Sammy's going to describe to us. That's the area that he traditionally operated, and that's where the action is going to take place. He's going to describe the blue areas where I kind of hung out in my area of operations. And then the pictures are pictures that I didn't have a photographer like some of the other guys did, following me around taking pictures, but I had a camera in my pocket, and when I had a chance, I took a snapshot. So upper left, there's a picture of some young ladies carrying supplies along a pretty substantial rice paddy dike, which also serves as an unimproved road. But what I point out is, look how flat it is out there, folks. You can see all the way down to the horizon, the tree lines on the horizon. Those tree lines are going to be trouble, because on those tree lines, that's where the canals are. And you've got to, if you look at the bottom picture there of the young fella wading across a canal, that's when we say canal, that's what a canal is going to look like to you. So there's some vegetation in there. Then the upper right, typical farmstead that you're going to find down in the area where we were operating. So, Sammy, you're going to arrive in your unit, and you're going to go on to a gun crew right away. What's going to happen?
The night that I arrived in Vietnam is the night they blew up the Long Binh ammunition dump.
Oh my.
So we were at the 90th replacement, and just had landed and got her bag put up and on the bunk, and then boom, all this fireworks starts happening. We had unexploded 155 rounds landing in the 90th replacement area. Well, we thought that was just combat. That's what we'd always seen in the movies and on TV, So we're, wow. Most of us didn't even get into a bunker because we just, too dumb. And finally, a sergeant came along and convinced us that we should be in a bunker. So we watched the fireworks from the bunker, and the next day we found out that it wasn't what normally happens in Vietnam. They blew up the largest ammunition dump in the world, which was the ammunition dump there at Long Binh, and we enjoyed it. So originally I had orders to go up north to the 173rd Airborne, and they struck those orders. I think there was 90 of us or 100 of us that they struck our original orders and put us as pad guards on the the ammunition dump. So we worked 12 hours a day. We would take turns. Some of us would do all night, some of us would do all day, and take turns. And I think we was there April and May, and then around the 1st of June is when they sent me down to C Battery, 2nd and 4th Artillery, 9th Infantry Division at Tan Tru. And
so you're down, so you go down to Tan Tru and join the 2nd or the 4th, and you went to Charlie Battery. Bravo Battery supported our operations a couple of years later. We had them with us, and so 2nd or the 4th, good outfit. And so tell us about joining up down there. Who was Sergeant Gant?
Sergeant Gant was the number 5 gun sergeant, and he was just a mean old sergeant. I think he was 28 years old, but he was a mean old sergeant, and he laid us the line and said, "This is the line you'll walk, and your response to this is this," and so forth. And he meant every word that he said, and God bless him. He saved our lives many times over just because of him being the kind of sergeant that he was. He said what he meant, and he meant what he said, and God bless him.
Well, from a historical perspective, and not to spend a lot of time at it, but just kind of set the stage for what's about to happen. Let me tell the folks that in November of 1967, at the request of a local Vietnamese district chief, the U.S. Army, particularly the 9th Division units, infantry and artillery, are going to engage in Operation Enterprise, which is going to be clearing out a base area that the enemy forces had established in what was called the Plain of Reeds.
Yep, Plain of Reeds.
Plain of Reeds. And so we're going to have a buildup here an artillery or an infantry unit, originally 3rd of the 47th Infantry, is going to go in and pick out an area. They're going to establish an area that will become fire-base cudgel. Now, for the youngsters out there, a cudgel is a medieval era weapon. Club. It's basically a club before the era of gunpowder. And so a cudgel, fire-based cudgel, will be established, and right next to it is fire-based mace, another artillery base that the artillery is going to be established for the artillery to support continuing operations from. So, Mike, let's look at that third chart, which is going to depict the layout of the fire-base cudgel. Third one down, next one. There's the planar reads. Okay, fire-based cudgel, there's the map on the left. This is from the artillery official history of the artillery in Vietnam. And there's a couple pictures of Sammy. And I wanted to throw in, because he's going to describe this here in just a moment, these things called flechettes. Flechettes was the type of an anti-personnel round that will be fired from artillery, from 90-millimeter tank guns and the tanks that we had over there. They even fired from, I carried a 40-millimeter grenade launcher when we were on convoy duty, filled with a flechette round just for close operations.
And they were very effective.
Very, 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 very effective. And Sammy's going to collect a few. I don't know if these were part of some of the he collected or not, but he's going to collect them in kind of a different way here. But I show you the area, and I mentioned the canals earlier. So here's the Sobey Canal, and it intersects with another canal. And the infantry comes in, they establish the area, they fly in the artillery, first Charlie Battery, second of the 4th, and then part of Delta Battery is going to fly in. The original infantry unit's going to leave, and then 2nd Battalion, the 5th Battalion, 60th Infantry Regiment is going to come in to support and defend, help defend the artillery. And, you know, I'm going to stop there. I've set the stage. So, you know, Sammy, President Lyndon B. Johnson, you spent some time at his ranch after the award of the Medal of Honor. Says this about you. He says, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action at the risk of his life and beyond the call of duty, Sergeant Davis, then PFC, distinguished himself during the early morning hours while serving as a cannoneer with Battery C at a remote fire support base. At approximately 0200 hours, the fire support base was under heavy enemy mortar attack. Simultaneously, an estimated reinforced Viet Cong battalion, folks, that's several hundred enemy, launched a fierce ground assault upon the fire support base. So, Sammy, at this point, in your own words, what happened?
Well, they started charging us. Where my gun was set up was right on one of the little canals, and they started coming across the canal. 150 to 250 at a time would do mass assault waves at us, and we fired the beehive at them. Well, first we fired HE, and then they decided that the beehive would be more effective, so we started firing beehive. I think we had 4 guns out there, howitzers, and I think we had 40 rounds of beehive, which was 10 rounds apiece, which normally you don't fire them unless things are really bad. And that's the sergeant started telling us, you know, okay, let's fire the beehive. So we set it over on muzzle action, which meant that a second that it cleared the end of the muzzle, it would blow up and send 1,800 darts or 1,500 darts, a whole bunch of little darts, flechettes, across the river. And it did fine, but they kept coming. Well, then when we'd fired all of our ammunition that we had for the howitzer, then the only thing we had left was small arms, and fired all of that. So we just kept doing what we could do, and it was towards the end of all the bullets and the howitzer shells, and when they were all gone, was towards the end is when Gwendale Holloway stood up across the river and waved his hat. There was a lull in between the attacks, and I seen Gwendale. We were getting flares from illumination from another unit. I don't remember what unit it was now, but they were popping flares for us. So it's bright a day as day at times, and flare popped, and I seen Gwendale stand up, and he waved his boonie hat at me. He said, "Don't shoot, I'm a GI." And I thought, oh my gosh, you know, I got to go get him. I can't leave my brother across the river. So I immediately jumped in the river and swam across. And when I got over there, I found the foxhole, and there were 3 men in it instead of just one. And 2 were extremely bad wounded. Billy Ray Crawford from Alvin, Texas, he'd almost lost his leg. It was just dangling. Jim Deister from Salina, Kansas. Jim had been shot right through the head, just below the ears, and shot in the chest. And we thought he was dead, but we could see what they were doing to the rest of the infantry that was over there, and we weren't going to leave our brothers over there for them to do anything to the remains of our brothers. So I picked up Jim Deister and put him straight across my shoulders. I picked up Billy Ray under one arm, and Gwendale, he could help a little bit. So Gwendale was under my other arm, and we start making our way back to the canal bank, which was about 60 yards, if I remember right, and had to lay him down several times. Gwendale still had some ammunition for his M16, and I think Jim had a bandolier on that had some clips in it too. So I'd lay it down, and the enemy they were all around us. Well, as soon as they recognized us for what we were, then naturally they'd do their job and try to shoot us. Well, I'd lay the guys down and shoot and get them cleared out a little bit, and then move on and do the same thing over and over and over and over again. When I got them back to the canal, well, the first one I took across was, I think I took Deister across first, because Gwendale could help protect Billy Ray. And when I got over to my side of the bank, well, 2 guys jumped in, Frank Gage and Bill Murray jumped in and helped get Jim up out of the water, and I immediately swam back across and got the other 2 guys. The other 2 guys could kind of help a little bit. So, and then we swam back across and then pulled them up. My guys helped pull them up on our side of the bank, and I pulled them back far enough away that we could start giving them whatever aid we could. And by then it was getting close to daylight. So the enemy started breaking contact, and we got to I got medevaced out. But I remember carrying Jim Deister to the helicopter that had come in to pick up our wounded. And I remember laying Jim in the helicopter and looking at the pile. There was, I don't know, 6 or 8 of our brothers laying in the helicopter already. And I laid Jim down with them. And then I passed out, and they loaded me up on that helicopter, and I woke up in the hospital in Saigon, and from Saigon they sent me to Japan, and then from Japan I got to come back to Saigon. Thanks to General Westmoreland, he got squared away that I could go back, because they were going to retire me from the Army medically, and I convinced General Westmoreland that I needed to go back and be with my brothers, because I didn't have a chance to say goodbye. And he understood that, so he let me go back to my unit, and that's what saved my life and the way I think. You know, if he hadn't let me go back, I don't think I could have lived with myself. So I got to go back and be with my brothers, and had 4 more months with my brothers, and that's when they told me that, hey, you've been put in for the Medal of Honor, which I didn't believe that I would receive, because I didn't think I'd done anything heroic. I just had done for my brothers what I knew they had done for me.
Well, you know, that's a fascinating story of a real combat action. But what marvels to me is the fact that you told it but didn't until the very end describe what happened to you in the whole process. I mean,
I was shot in the right thigh with an AK-47, and I had 30 beehive holes, flechette holes in me.
Yeah.
Only 7 they dug out of my body, but I had right at 30 holes in me. That's the next morning. I'm sitting there in my foxhole, and man, I'm hurting unbelievably bad. And I'm expecting to see big bullet. You know, I could see the big bullet hole in my leg, but why was my belly and chest hurting so bad, and my legs? Well, all I could see was just little X's, and that's from the flechettes, the 4 fins on them. When they passed through, that I would just had little tricklets of blood coming out, and I'm thinking, wow, well, that can't be right. Why am I hurting so bad? Well, my back was broke. The howitzer, because the enemy had shot a rocket at the howitzer and basically blew it up, but I went ahead and fired it anyway because it was the only thing we had left to fire, and it kept running over me every time I'd fire. And that's what broke my back and crushed my ribs. And
well,
but you don't lose till you quit trying.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. You don't lose till you quit trying. You, in fact, went over and got those 3 guys and brought them back across the canal. You'd already received those wounds, right?
Oh, yes, sir. I was already wounded.
Yeah. And so, folks, you know, this is really an incredible story. He could have crawled off over there and said, "Oh, I'm hurt bad," but no, he jumped right in there and went to get those 3 fellows. And so,
my soul would not have allowed me to lay there and watch what was going on without trying to do something for my brothers. Because, like I say, I knew that that's what they would do for me, so I just did for them.
That's right, and that is an excellent explanation. In the course of your healing, I mean, you're in Saigon in the hospital, then you go to Camp Zama Hospital in Japan, then back to Saigon.
Yes,
and
sir.
So you said they were going to retire you from the Army, and you pulled out an ace to play, didn't you?
General Westmoreland.
General Westmoreland.
Yes, that was at Camp Zama, Japan. When they told me, the captain in charge of my ward there said, well, son, I'd been running like 107 fever, and when my fever broke and I started, you know, being able to see where I was, and that's when they told me, said, son, well, we're going to send you back to the States and we're going to retire you from the Army. And I said, but I don't want to retire from the Army. I don't want to go back to the States. I want to go back to Vietnam and be with my brothers. And he said, no. And I said, well, yeah. Call General Westmoreland. Me and him's good friends. He just gave me a pair of boots about 2 weeks ago, which he had. And
tell him the boot story. This is too funny. Tell him the boot story.
Well, Westy was 9th Infantry Division in World War II. So now he loved all these troops, but he did shine a little brighter on the in my opinion, on the 9th Infantry Division troops. And he'd be flying over in his helicopter and see a group of us down there doing our job, and as long as we weren't firing, you know, they would land, the helicopter would land, and General Westmoreland would come walking over and talk to the troops. Well, on this one particular day, we were doing sustained fire. In other words, we were just firing like 7 miles away, helping the infantry shoo away the enemy. So they weren't in our location, and the helicopter landed, and our captain came by and said, it's General William Childs Westmoreland, just do whatever he wants. He says, we'd been going boom, 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 4 guns. And he said, when Westy comes upon your gun, the other 3 guns will just pick up the pace, and you just fall in and just do whatever he wants. So I think we were the last gun that Westy walked upon, and now he had caught us, we were extremely muddy, and most of us didn't have shirts on, and I had an old pair of boots. My boots, I had 3 toes hanging out of each boot. And the reason why I didn't have new boots was because my feet, believe it or not, were in a little better shape than most of the other guys, because my boots let the water out. And down where we were, you were always wet, always in the water, always in the mud. And to hold that water in a good boot made your feet have sores on them like you couldn't believe. Well, my feet, now they were not in good shape, but they were in better shape than most of the other kids. And I attributed to the fact that, well, because of the big holes in my boots, the water would drain out and my feet would actually kind of dry out a little bit. Well, Westy came up, and there were, I think, 4 of us on the gun, and he started asking us questions. Of course, we were at attention. And when he came to me, he looked me right in the eye and looked down, and I was just unbelievably muddy. And when he looked down at my boots, and his eyes got big, and I remembered, oh, I got my boots on that's got the holes in it. I wiggled my toes at him, and he said, "Private, is that the only pair of boots you have?" And I said, "Yes, sir, it is." Now, I could have had a brand new pair of boots, but this was by choice, but I didn't tell him that. I said, "Yes, sir, it is my only pair of boots." And he turned around to say something to my captain, and my captain had on a brand new pair of Cochran jump boots. And he turned back to me and he said, "Son, what size are your boots?" I said, 10W, sir. He turned to my captain and he said, "Captain, what size are your boots?" And my captain said, 10W, sir. And the General Westmoreland said, "Take them boots off and give them to that boy." So I sat down in the mud right there and put on my brand new pair of Cochran jump boots.
Well, that's an amazing story. And,
but that's how I got friends with General Westmoreland.
yeah.
And then 2 weeks later, I was in the hospital, and when the captain there in Camp Zama, Japan, told me they were going to send me home, I said, "Well, call General Westmoreland. Me and him's good friends. He just gave me a pair of boots 2 weeks ago." And sure enough, he did contact General Westmoreland. And Westy, I remember waking up, and Westy was standing by my bed. And I said, "Sir, I don't want to go home. I don't want to retire from the Army. I need to go back and be with my brothers." And he said, "I understand, son. I'll do what I can." And they came back later, and he said, "As soon as you stabilize here, we will send you back to, I think it was 3rd Field in Saigon, the 9th Infantry Division Hospital, and as soon as you can walk, you can go back to your unit." So, and that's what I did. And he kept checking on me. He would just, for no reason, appear when I was in the hospital. Then when I got back to my unit, and General Westmoreland and I were friends throughout our life.
In your book, you describe that whole episode of your desire to go back to your unit after being severely wounded as closure, putting closure on your experience. And so I also see in there patriotism. I mean, you never had a chance to say goodbye to the men you served with, which we,
Yes,
the people haven't gotten the idea, we call them our brothers. And so, am I right? Is that where we're headed with this? I mean,
most certainly.
This idea, yeah.
Brothers are forever.
Brothers are forever, and to this day, we refer to other Vietnam veterans as our brothers, because our homecoming wasn't what we thought it would be, was it? Talk a little bit about that.
Well, our homecoming, when we landed at the airport in California, I think it was San Francisco or one of them airports there, but that's where all the planes were landing at when we came back, and there was all kinds of people there at the airport protesting, and they booed us and called us baby killer and took stuff out of bags and threw it at us. And I think it was stuff they picked up out of their yard after their dog had been there, and threw it at us and kept calling us bad names. Well, then we got on the next plane and then came back. Let's see, where did I come back to? Well, at the moment, I don't remember where I flew back to, but.
Well, you're going to end up eventually. You're going to end up
Fort Hood,
eventually
Texas.
at Fort Hood. Yeah.
Yeah, I flew from San Francisco back to Fort Hood. And when we landed at Fort Hood, well, at Dallas, that the negative response was not there. I mean, there were a few people there catcalling us, but nothing like what we had went through in San Francisco. I mean, that's still part of the nightmares, what all they did and said at our landing at San Francisco.
So, folks, I've asked Sammy to kind of draw out on that a little bit, because tonight's theme is patriotism, and I think you understand this patriotism aspect of patriotism from his service that he described, from his combat action down there in the Mekong Delta, to his being wounded, severely wounded, to his going to the hospital in Japan, to coming back to his unit for closure, all that with his brothers, and his patriotism. Counterposed to that is the coming home, where we see visibly, he and I had kind of the same experience, a couple of years, 18 months apart, coming home. Anti-patriotism from those that were protesting the war. I'll let you draw your own conclusions on what's going on now in the country.
Well, as a Medal of Honor recipient, I was invited to lead parades all over the country. That was part of my job as a Medal of Honor recipient. And so I got to see maybe a little bit more than the average troop of the negativity that they would show towards the soldiers. But there again, that's part of what's in my heart today. That's one of the reasons why I try to welcome our troops home today when they're leaving. I try to be there for them, and when they come back home, I try to be there for them because I know how important that is.
Well, and it is, and that's why we have these programs, because part of it is indeed education, to let people know, if they haven't heard it before,
yes, sir,
what it was all about, and if they haven't heard it before, to hear it again, because it all bears repeating on the core values of the military, particularly in this case, in this program, the core values of the Medal of Honor Society. We're gonna, I've got one more thing I want to talk about, folks. I've neglected to remind you earlier, if you have any questions you want to ask, please type them in at the bottom of the screen. In just a few minutes, we're going to go to question and answer period. But I got a couple more things we want to do, but type in any questions you have. We'll answer as many of them as we can while we're on the air. But now, you have been referred to as Sammy Lee. You've been referred to as Dave. That was a nickname for you at one time.
Yes, sir.
What's your other nickname?
Well, a couple of them I can't say over the air, but
well, the one we can say.
Sambo. There were two Sams in my family. There was me, Sammy Lee, and my first cousin, Sammy Elmo, and they called him Mo and called me Bo. So it's Mo and Bo. And
Mo and Bo, yeah.
Yes, sir. So I named my oldest son when he was born. I wanted to name him after me, but I knew better than to name him Sammy Davis Jr., so I named him Bo, B-E-A-U, Mo.
There you go. But aren't you also known as the real Forrest Gump?
Oh, yes, sir. Most certainly am.
Tell us
Most certainly
story.
am.
Share that story with us.
Well, in the movie Forrest Gump, when Forrest is being presented the Medal of Honor, that is my actual film footage of when President Johnson awarded me the medal. They simply put Tom's face over my body. So that's, when you're watching the movie, that's my body, that's my film, just with Tom's face on it. And they based Forrest's actual citation on my actual citation. So I'm the Forrest Gump.
You're the real Forrest Gump. So they superimposed Tom Hanks' head on your shoulders with the president.
on my face,
yep.
The back of the head. As my mama told me when the movie came out, and she said, Sammy Lee, that's the back of your head. And well, I go, yeah, they just put the face on.
And so, well, that's a great story. Well, Sammy, I thank you very much for sitting in with us here tonight. I'm going to ask you to do one more thing for us before we go to Q&A, and that is in honor of all our brothers. Would you play just a few notes of O Shenandoah for us, please?
Well, I would be honored to play Shenandoah for our brothers. I learned to play the harmonica in Vietnam. My mom thought I was bored because of the short letters that I was writing, so she sent me a harmonica, and she said, son, I hope this helps you be not quite so bored. Well, I didn't know how to play it, but my sergeant knew that I got a harp, and he thought that being I had a harmonica that I knew how, and he asked me to play Shenandoah. And I told him I didn't know how to play it, but when an E6 asked sergeant, or excuse me, by then I was corporal, if I would play, I learned how to play it, so I did. And I still play it for Sergeant Johnston Dunlap. He's on the wall in Washington, D.C. Here's to all of our brothers and sisters, Shenandoah. Rest in peace, brother.
Well, thanks very much. Tim, you got some questions?
I do. Thank you, Colonel Vossler. I appreciate it. Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Nelson, and I'm honored to serve as the Chief of Development for the Army Heritage Center Foundation. I'm going to be asking Sergeant Davis the questions that you've typed in and submitted in the Q&A section. Obviously, we can't get to them all, but Sergeant Davis has offered to try to answer several of them afterward. As long as your email is in there, we'll certainly pass those on to Sergeant Davis. Sammy, it's good afternoon, brother. How are you?
Good afternoon, sir. We're doing good. Life is good.
Glad to hear it. It's a true honor to have you here with us. So I'm just gonna jump right into these questions. There's a bunch. So let me start. This is from Wayne. Wayne asked, taking care of your brother, it's hard to explain that to civilians sometimes. Can you explain what really ties those who serve in the armed forces and our armed forces members together like that?
What tied us together was being in the military, being in the Army. You experience the same stuff. You see how other people go through it and make your decision on what your reaction is going to be by their reaction. And pretty soon you realize that, wow, we're all brothers. And that's why I knew I had to go across the river to get those three men, because I believed in my heart that they would come get me. How could I lay over there and hide in a mud hole when I knew that they'd come get me? So I did for them what I knew they'd do for me.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. Douglas asked this question. We've heard time and time again and witnessed time and time again just some of that negative reaction you spoke about when you came back home. Has anyone ever apologized to you for protesting back then, now that times have changed and maybe they've grown to understand
Yes, sir.
it? Have they apologized to you, sir?
What? I indeed have had many apologies. They started, well, it took several years for them to start realizing that what they had done during that time period was not totally correct, and they started apologizing, and I still get it today. I'll have people walk up to me and say, well, Sergeant Davis, I was one of those protesters back then, and I apologize. I didn't know what I was doing. They misled us into believing this, and it wasn't. We found out later that it wasn't all true, so we apologize for doing this. And I tell them, well, there are many ways to serve your country. You stepping forward for what you believe is right now is what's serving our country now. So let's all of us stand up for what you believe is right in your heart. And it works.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm going to tag on to that as a veteran as well. You hear a lot. Thank you for your service. How different is it today as patriotic Americans? What should we do to better honor today's soldiers? What would you recommend that non-soldiers do to honor those soldiers that serve today, perhaps when they meet with them?
Well, always stand up for what you believe is right in your heart. What's happening around the world today is being led by news media. And in our travels, we have the privilege of traveling everywhere, and I talk to people, and I firmly believe that the majority of the people believe the way I do in my heart. But it's the news media that all too often is misleading us and thinking, well, because it was on the news media, that's got to be the way everybody thinks. Well, that's not the way everybody thinks. But it's extremely important that each of us stand up for whatever you believe is right in your heart. You know, if those that don't believe the way I do want to stand up, that's okay. That's part of what we fought for, was for every citizen to stand up for what you believe is right. So let's all of us do that. Let's all stand up for what you believe is right in your heart.
Thank you, sir. This is
and
not.
that doesn't include looting and destroying stuff.
Thank you for that comment, sir. This is not a question, but it's a wonderful comment. I thought I'd share it with you. This from Roberto Juarez. He says, Sergeant Davis, first I want to thank you and your service to our country, and also thank you for sharing your story as a JROTC instructor. I've shared your story with cadets, and it's not often when 30 teenagers will sit still, not move or talk, and they're fully absorbed in what you're sharing here today. So I just wanted to share that with you, sir. And thank you.
Most excellent. I can't wait for this virus to be over so I can get back out and talk to schools again, because I really miss it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So Layla Lopez wants to know, who was your hero growing up?
Who was my hero?
Growing up.
Well, my grandpas and my dad. My one grandpa was Spanish-American War. Next grandpa was World War I. My dad was World War II. My oldest brother was Korea. The Berlin conflict was my next brother. It was just and they were all my heroes, you know, because I got to hear stories of what happened during their prospective time in service, and they were my heroes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And of course, John Wayne.
Yeah, everybody's hero. So Captain Blake Friend has asked this question, sir. First off, he thanks you for your service, but wants to know if you've been back to Vietnam, and if so, what was it like for you to return there?
Yes, sir. We went back in 2016. I got to stand on the exact spot where I pulled those 3 men across the river. Jim Deister had an original set of orders, and it had the grid coordinates on it, and we typed them into our telephone, and my phone that doesn't work here where I live was working perfectly in Vietnam, and a little blue dot came up, and we, a few steps here, and we got to stand exactly. And one of the reasons why we knew that that's where we were in the right place, both of us remembered a great, I think it was a cypress tree, but I'm not sure, great big old tree, and there it was still laying in the canal. The big tree was,
oh my.
Most of the limbs were rotted, but you could see the trunk was like 6 or 7 foot in diameter, and that big trunk was right there, still there, and we go, oh wow. So Jim told me more of the story on why he was across the river. I didn't really know the reason why he was across the river till that day. And there had been a whole company of our infantry over there, and most of them had gotten wounded so bad that they couldn't participate anymore. But meeting the people of South Vietnam, we went to Tan An, we went to Tan Tru, we went to Saigon, we went everywhere we were very fortunate, got to go everywhere that I had been, and the people treated us unbelievably great. Little kids would run up to us on the street and touch our arm and say, thank you. And our interpreter said, that's probably the only word of English that they know, but because you're, got blonde hair and you're not slanted-eyed, you must be a GI. And so they'd come up and say, thank you. And you could look in their eye and see that they meant it. They meant thank you. And I just loved being over there and meeting the people again. It was awesome.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Well, here's a couple of fun ones. Did Tom Hanks, in the movie Forrest Gump, did Tom Hanks know that that was your face that was superimposed his face on? And did you get a chance to meet him at all?
I have definitely met Tom Hanks. Gary Sinise and I are brothers. I mean, we're very close. Tom Hanks is a friend, yes.
Good, sir. Good. And here's one that clearly I think might be from a little bit of an older attendee. Since you were a Medal of Honor recipient, you were probably well known. Did you ever meet the other Sammy Davis, the Rat Pack member?
I had the privilege of knowing Sammy Davis Jr. very well. But that was even, well, no, it was after I came back from Vietnam, but I got to go to many different programs that Sammy Davis Jr. was in, and we got to be close friends, very close friends. He was a super fine man.
Good, sir. Good, sir. Well, here's an interesting question. At what moment in your life have you felt that patriotism in this country was at its highest point, and should we be worried about today?
Well, we should always be worrying about patriotism. It's not being taught in our schools today, from my experience. Too many teachers don't teach patriotism, and I believe that we do need to teach that. We don't lose till we quit trying. So let's all keep standing up for what you believe is right in your heart, and teach our children, our grandchildren. It'll work. I know it has to work, or we will lose.
Thank you. From Mark, sir, did you have particular tactics or something you implemented to keep your fear in check and under control, particularly around those moments in the action in which you were awarded the Medal of Honor? So did you have something you practiced? What kept you going and all of those things?
In my opinion, the only thing that can keep you going during those times when I was faced by the enemy, the only thing that can keep you going, it's not the absence of fear. It's the love in your heart for your fellow man. And that love in my heart for my fellow man was greater than the fear that I was feeling. And I was scared really bad.
Thank you, sir. Sorry, I'm trying to. What are your thoughts today? What advice would you offer? There's a lot of ROTC students on this call. Many of them will go ahead and go into the service. What are your comments, thoughts, advice that you would offer for those going into the Army? And thank you for people like Arnold for asking that question.
Cool. I encourage you to go into the military, and whichever branch you think would serve you best is what you go into, and it will be whatever you make out of it. If you think this is the best thing that ever happened to me, it will be the best thing that ever happened to you. Or if you think it's the worst thing, it'll be the worst thing that ever happened to you. But I encourage, when I talk to the schools all over America, I encourage those that would like to go to join the military, because that's where that opened up my mind and my heart when I joined the military and let me see the world. You know, it lets you be aware of what really is going on in the world, not just in your small life.
What we haven't said.
An education in the military that in my opinion, they can't get anywhere else. The education that I got in the military is still serving me today.
What we haven't told the audience is Sammy stayed on in the Army for 20 years.
Well, I was medically retired twice, but General Westmoreland helped me out both times. And the last time, I 18 years, and my body had got to the point where I couldn't function any longer, and I spent several years in hospital and wheelchairs, and today they've fixed about everything, and today I can walk.
So you were. Two questions about President Johnson. Were you nervous to meet him? And and it's interesting that you went to his ranch. Was there a particular reason why you went there, and what did you do when you were there?
Well, when I'd received all kind of training in the military, but I'd never received any training on how to go meet the President of the United States. So when I'm standing up there, I was really, really, really frightened because I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what my response should be, and I did the very best I could. Well, he took the 5 recipients into a little back room and was talking to each of us individually. And when he came to me, he said, "Well, son, I've got a small ranch just 90 miles south of where you're stationed, which is Fort Hood, Texas." And he said, he gave me a card, and it had some numbers to poke in on the gate. And he said, "Come see me anytime you can." Well, it took about 2 weeks for me to get down there, and I went down. I got to go down several times. The President was never there. He was always working in the White House. But his wife, say again? Yeah, Lady Bird. She was there, and she would bring me in, and Lady Bird and I became close friends. She loved wildflowers, and we would go for hour and a half, 2-hour walks all around their property, and she'd show me all the flowers and explain to me, "Well, I picked this one up in Flanders Field, this particular bulb, and now it's growing and doing great." And it was really good for my heart and my soul to go down and spend time with Lady Bird.
Sir,
and I got to talk to the President several times because we'd always call him, but he'd apologize. Say, "Well, I'm sorry, I can't be there." And Lady Bird say, "I'll take care of him," and she did.
Sir, in the very beginning, you talked about patriotism, and I guess I'll ask this: you mentioned that it's love and respect, love for your country, respect for your country, love for your fellow man, and respect for your fellow man.
Most certainly, yes, sir.
Is that how you feel would be best to define, particularly today, to define patriotism?
Yes, sir. It still works today. It worked back then, and it will work today if we apply it. Love and respect.
Awesome, awesome. And a couple more questions, if you're okay with that. So 2 things. One is, well, we'll just go with this first. What books would you suggest for these young people to be able to read with regard to leadership, and let me see, becoming a leader and leadership service, particularly around the military? Do you have books that you could suggest that they may like to read?
Well, like my book.
There you go.
You don't lose till you quit trying.
All right. That's a good book. Another person is asking, as we teach young trainees coming through basic, I don't know if this person is a drill sergeant or a commander, what would be the one thing you'd tell these young people in basic training? They're soldiers now. They're getting ready to go out to the AIT or whatever the case may be. What's the one thing you tell them to do as they launch their career?
No matter what you're faced with, you don't lose till you quit trying. And it works, because truly, you don't lose till you quit trying.
Awesome. Well, sir, I have hit the limit, and I promised you when we first talked about this that we would stick the limit. So let me thank you again, Sammy, for your time, and to you, Tom, as well, and to all our attendees. I'm sure you'll agree that this was a very special time together. Before I turn it back over to Colonel Vossler, we hope you'll come back next week and attend what I think is our 5th session in the series.
Yes, sir.
And we will be honored to host Sergeant David Bellavia, who will talk to us about the importance of commitment. And so we will see you next Thursday, October the 1st at 5 o'clock. Colonel Vossler, back to you, sir.
Well, I'd like to thank Sergeant First Class Sammy Lee Davis for joining us tonight.
It's been an honor, brother. Thank you.
It's been an honor. You know, we as Henry V said, we happy few, we banded brothers. He who sheds his blood with me will forever be my brother, and that's the way it is with us now. And so I do want to commend. I got to know Sammy. I'm talking back and forth a little bit, but I got to know him through his book. You know, you don't lose till you quit trying. And Dixie's got a book out there too.
Yes, sir.
That Endless Love and Second Chances.
Yes, sir. And her book's even better than mine.
Well, I have to say I haven't read hers, but it's on order. Okay,
You will enjoy hers even more than mine.
So it's been a great pleasure. So we're going to go to the War on Terror next week with Staff Sergeant David Bellavia, and folks come back and see us. And remember, this program by next week will be archived and available on the Foundation's website if any of your friends have missed it, or if you wish to see it again. So good night. Take care. Stay healthy.